Because I'll be honest with you, in where I live in Lake Landor, I back up to my property. Actually, there's an easement, and then I back up to a property where hunting is allowed. So there are times, where I hear, blasts of shotguns going off quite frequently around this time of year. It can be very close to, the properties inside Lake Landor. So my question is, how far is that bullet going to? How far is that bullet, the rifle bullet from the ground, how far is that going to travel?
Well, it all depends on the weight of the bullet, but in today's market, you're allowed to shoot a rifle slug through a shotgun. So if somebody had a shotgun, they were to shoot at a deer that was 100 yards away. That bullet would basically begin to taper off and fall down, and it would travel 300 yards before it hits the ground at that elevation. If you take a .243 bullet, that's a good example, that's a caliber of a .243, is zeroed at 100 yards. At 200 yards, it drops 3 inches. At 300 yards, it drops 12 inches. At 400 yards, it's down to about 19 inches. So you can see that the weight of that bullet is causing it to continually drop. So if a person is a sniper, he's able to calculate a scope that's designed to shoot a deer at 400 yards by just based on where the mill dot is in that scope, and you hold up and make that shot. So the question is, it's difficult to say, but an experienced person with a rifle is always aware of his target. You're looking through a very nice optic. You can see your target. You can see what's behind that target. Well, my guy today that's allowed to use a shotgun, he can load 5 shells in it. Each one of those can hold 15 to 60 projectiles. And when they leave, it's a scatter approach. So if there's a deer hopping through the woods and he's shooting, and it doesn't knock that deer down, he can shoot 5 times, and you could have as many as 300 projectiles flying through the woods.
And I get that, and I get that, and that's right.
Now,
Wait a minute.
Okay, yeah,
but Gary,
yeah.
kind of what you're saying, though, in relation to Mr. Black's question is, at 300 or 400 yards, it still has fatal velocity.
Absolutely, no question about it.
And the shotgun shell, to go me if I'm wrong, I know it's blasting these 80 pellets or whatever. I mean, how far out can I, with a shotgun shell, how far can I kill?
Well, I mean, a shotgun shell with the market today can probably kill you at 250 yards. So, I mean, you still have the ability of a projectile. In today's market, we are able to shoot a black powder rifle, which is allowed in the county. There are rifles being built today that have the capability of shooting a 5-inch group at 400 yards. I mean, so that is a permitted use today. It's shooting a smokeless powder. It's traveling at the exact same speed as a centerfire rifle is. So the only difference is it's called a primitive firearm. It's the most modern production gun that you can imagine.
And you can buy them without a waiting list.
Mr. Gray.
And you can buy them without a waiting list.
And you can buy them, and you don't need any special permits, and you can hunt with them, and you can not only use them in what you would call the primitive of regular season, you can use it in the firearm season as well.
But Mr. Gray, if you were 250 yards downrange, I had the rifle, you had the shotgun, I think you'd be in trouble.
If you had the shotgun...
If I had the rifle and you had the shotgun.
And you were shooting
you were
towards each
shooting
other, I
toward
imagine.
me.
Well, I don't know. Because you got to look at the number of projectiles
But
being thrown at you.
I'm familiar. I used to do hunting. I'm quite familiar.
Most hunters don't have the ability without practice
they're-
to effectively shoot accurately without practice.
No hunter is going to shoot 250 yards with a shotgun.
Well, they're not intentionally, but if you're shooting at a deer, and all of a sudden a turkey flies by, and you got buckshot in the gun, and you raise that...
It's not a 250-yard shot, Mr. Gray.
Well, I can go back if you really want to look at the ballistics and give them to you. I don't carry the ballistic knowledge of all of the weapons with me.
That.
But I'm not trying to take away anything from shotguns. You have to understand, I'm not here to have... We already have shotguns approved. We already have black powder guns approved. We already have 22 rifles approved. So basically, that's all approved. The only thing we're looking at is basically adding the ability for somebody that wants to shoot a rifle. And I did a little checking tonight to find out if you have a bean field and there are too many deer eating your beans up, you get a damage permit, you can actually go in and you can shoot them with a rifle. You can actually shoot them with a rifle at night. You can actually shoot them with a rifle at night with a spotlight. So these are permitted uses in the marketplace today. So what I'm asking you for is during a normal season, is it okay for somebody that has the ability to effectively shoot a rifle to use it to hunt in the county under the state ordinance? That's my request.
Let me ask a question of the county attorney, because as we are now, we have a county ordinance. And obviously it's in conflict with the state ordinance because we don't allow things, so it could be more restrictive.
Well, I believe it's allowed by state law. I mean, that it's one of several options.
To be more restrictive.
That it's, right, so it's not in conflict, it is more restrictive, but I don't know that, I would say in conflict.
So this is one of those things that I like to consider a reversible decision. If we decide to go with rifles, and then there's a outcry that was the wrong thing, bless you, then we could reverse it and go back to whatever our code was.
I believe that's true, subject to whatever state approval might be required. It's my understanding, and I haven't read through the regulations, but,
Okay.
you know, in order to allow the 22s, they would need state approval. I don't know if later, 6 months down the road, you wanted to change that and remove that firearm, you would also have to go to the state and get approval. So I don't know if the board could do it on its own.
Could you find out that process from Mr. Emerson?
Yes.
Mr.
Because
Thomas, I don't know if you fully understood your question. You were not trying to change to allow 22 rifles to use for deer hunting. You were asking that if you approve the use of rifles of a 24 caliber or larger for deer hunting, and you decided that there was a problem after the upcoming year, that you could notify the game department
Right.
and make a change
And
and
go back
revert
to the way it was.
and that would be able to be done without any complication at all. So if you saw where it was a safety issue or some other concern, I would fully support making a change going back, because my number one concern always is safety, and number two is always education. You need to educate people about doing the right thing with firearms. That's so important.
Well, and that's, I think that's really the gist of our concern. My firearms, I shoot 10 feet at the most, because I'm shooting snakes. Okay? That's all I do. You know, and I hope that's all I have to do. But I understand the rifle projectile is a little further. I was told when a little kid, when I had a .22, be careful because it shoots almost a mile. I think we're all concerned about the safety part. I think if we go ahead and comply with what the state does, that satisfies your requirement. And if I'm not telling out of school, I don't think game and inland fishing would have a problem with us being on the same with the state. But I want to make sure that if I have a problem, that I can go back to the way it was. And I think that's a fair, you know, compromise we're trying to work out so we can make everybody happy, which never happens, but I think this is a case where we can at least try.
And I support that and agree with that completely, and I would
Okay.
make available to anybody in the board that wanted to come down that I have a rifle range, I have guns. I would be glad to give anybody a full safety demonstration on how to use them, how to shoot them. So if you needed to talk to your constituents and explain the difference between shotgunning and rifling and anything else, I will devote my time to you. I've been through a full training class with the NRA. I'm a range safety officer. And we've got one guy here that is extremely knowledgeable, Kevin Reitman, who's been in the building department. He's a ballistics expert. So what I can't help you with, you ask him, and he'll be glad to help you. So.
He's a Marine. We knew he's an expert. Okay? Does the board have you want to add something?
The only thing I would add to that discussion as far as changing it back, you always have to comply with the time frame so that it can be published in that
Right.
manual. So if you were to make this change, we'd go through a public hearing, it would be in effect for the next hunting season in November, starting in
Right.
November 14. You wouldn't be able to change that if you changed your mind next summer. It would
Wouldn't-
be in effect through that
Right.
whole hunting season. And then if you got to this time frame during the hunting season and had a problem, you could change it. It would be given to the game next year,
Right.
and then it would be for
But it's-
15
But it's
before it
not
would
going to be in
change.
effect now.
No.
For this hunting season.
No,
So,
the next
we're
fall.
talking about 14.
That's correct.
So if we approve it now, or we go through the process and it gets approved, this would be the 2014, November 20th or something like that is when hunting season starts?
Right, but the hunting season runs from, I think the licenses start in July 1st and it runs through June.
Okay.
So, as of the regulations being published in May,
Right.
somebody could immediately start hunting coyotes in the summer with a rifle. Even though now you can hunt groundhogs, there was a little gray area as to whether you could shoot coyotes with a rifle or not, and that would open that opportunity up, which I think is a great thing. We've got a problem.
We got a problem with coyotes in the county?
We got a big problem. Big problem. And
In the town of
We
Bowling
have
Green?
we have coyotes in Bowling Green.
In the town of Bowling
In
Green?
the town of Bowling Green.
And they can't shoot firearms
And we
in Bowling
can't shoot a
Green?
firearm.
right.
Okay,
So
all right, well,
my son was out this week in one of our blinds and just basically observing the deer with my grandson, and two coyotes came within 30 feet of the blind. So,
I haven't seen any. So you keep them up there?
Across from the building, even by the building department there by McDonald's, there's been several sightings. Right there in Bowling Green.
If they cross the street there, they'll be in the county.
Then you can shoot them.
I just do snakes. All right,
but that's an important concern, because if they get in town, the next thing you know, they're catching small dogs and cats and other problems. And I mean, that's something that we don't want to face, but we got to address it. So,
all right, I'd like a public hearing necessarily, not that I don't believe in just you, but more public comment, just to see if there is that groundswell, I think, like Mr. Black was saying, of people out there who want to do it. But, okay.
Have a public hearing, or a informational, whatever you want to call it, meeting on the 10th of December.
Yeah, I think that's good. Mr. Gray, I hope you'll, support that. We're gonna look at the state ordinance, and we'll have a public hearing on the state ordinance for our December meeting. That gives us plenty of time to advertise, and you plenty of time to have folks that come that want it. And I'm sure since we're gonna advertise, folks that don't want it will come. We can look at that public hearing, complying with the state, and again, in the back of my mind, if there's a problem, we should be able to go back the next hunting season. So I think that would be fair. You don't have to bring any ammo with you next time?
well,
I think
what I was trying to do is
we'll work that
save you the headache of going to a public hearing where people might not have the experience and the knowledge that want to get up and speak to you because they don't really understand rifle hunting, because they really haven't been doing it in Caroline County for 25 years. But if
Yeah.
you want to, while the professionals are here, I mean, I'm sure Ryan would be glad to answer any questions, any concerns that I haven't addressed. The same thing with Paul Atkins. I'm sure he'd be glad to speak.
Well, we're following your lead,
Okay.
and we're gonna move ahead with the change in the county ordinance, or at least a public hearing for the change in the county ordinance that would comply with the state. And in doing that, we will take whatever public input we get, and if nobody comes and says it's a bad idea, then we'll probably move right ahead and comply with what the state has. Okay?
Thank you very much.
I think we'll do that. So we'll set that up for December 10th? Mr. Cully, public hearing? Okay. And we're going to look at the complying with the state.
December
All right.
the 10th?
December the 10th. All right, I can't resist anymore. Show me a 223 shell if you got it in there.
I do not have any 223 stuff.
Okay.
I have stuff that basically shows you a 22 round that's legal. I have the 50 cal round that basically you can shoot through the muzzle loader today to show you the size of it. Now, a projectile with no powder is just a
Mr.
projectile.
Gray, if you will take your bag and have a nice day, we would appreciate it very much, sir.
No
Because a
problem.
50 caliber round is a bit large for me.
No, it's just a projectile. It's a
that's-
50 caliber projectile that you
projectile.
use in a muzzle loader.
Okay.
Okay? What I wanted to show you was a package, and the package says these are 50 caliber rifle bullets. That's allowed in Caroline today. I was just going to show you what a 50 caliber rifle bullet looks like that you can shoot legally.
Aren't most muzzle loaders shooting 50 cal now for deer hunting?
Are they what?
Aren't they shooting 50 caliber for deer hunting?
Yes,
during muzzle loading
that's,
season?
basically, that's what you're shooting is a deer hunting gun.
Is there any meat left after you hit it?
It's a 310 grain bullet.
It's big.
I know. That's what I'm saying, is there any meat left?
I just,
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Gray. We'll see you December 10th.
Okay,
All
thank you.
right. And thanks to the other folks that came. Sheriff, when we have this public hearing, we want you up here in front of us. Okay, not behind, not over there, up in front of us. Thank you, gentlemen. All right, let's go back. Thank you. I thought that was going to be a little shorter, but it was interesting. Thank you, Mr. Fincham. We'll go back to 4. We've got these property manager residence text amendments. Then we got to do the YMCA and then Dawn. Jeff, you can't have a 50 caliber. It's like this big. Is there any meat? Is there any meat left? But it's a hole this big. And the 223 explodes when it hits. So it leaves a big hole. Those are the weapons of war. I'm 45. But it's got snake shot. It's got snake shot in it. Yeah, snake shot. We're so excited here. All right, Mr. Fincham, thank you very much for your patience. Let's talk about the farm manager or the property manager's residence text amendments being proposed.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, discussion of this item was continued from your last meeting. The Planning Commission had forwarded a recommendation of approval related to the text amendment for a property manager's residence. During the first reading before the board, several issues were raised and staff was directed to go back and make some suggested changes for the board's considerations. There were certain questions about how to qualify the structures or so that the structures did not become prevalent throughout the rural areas of the county. The board considered the potential inclusion on the National or Virginia Register of Historic Places. Generally wanted us to tighten up the language so that these were fairly limited in terms of their application in the county. A couple of things that we have done, I think we've tried to do that. We've included your reference to the Virginia National Register of Historic Places. We had the design considerations where the design has to be compatible to the main structure. We added language that the special exception permit would be applicable to an entire parcel, even though the minimum parcel size would, for qualifying lands would be 50 acres. We've added a qualifier on the size of the property manager's residence. Originally, that recommendation was 2,500 square feet. We've also added a qualifier to that that says, however, in no case shall it exceed 50% of the square footage of the principal structure. So, for example, if you had a 3,000 square foot dwelling, you wouldn't necessarily want a 2,500 square foot accessory structure. We limit it to 50%, which would be roughly 1,500 square feet. So there's a relationship there between the size of your principal structure and your caretaker's residence. The other qualification that we put in there, number 8, that there cannot be no other accessory residential structures on the property. We have a number of provisions where you can have an accessory residential structure. We have family apartments, we have temporary structure, other temporary structures. We currently had farm tenant structures. Again, how many of these accessory structures do you really want to have on your rural lands? And I think we've covered most of the items that the board asked us to go back and provide recommendations to you on.
So that has nothing to do with the original house. When you talk about other residential structures, you're talking about another manager's
Right.
cottage.
Right. You've got your principal structure, which by this would be on the Virginia or National Register of Historic Places. You can have, as proposed, by a special exception permit granted by the board, a property manager structure as an accessory residential use, which would be subject to the limitations adopted by the board.
Okay. What if I have 50 acres, a big fine house, and I want a manager's cottage, but it's not it's not on the register, on the historic register? Why is that a deal killer, if you will?
My understanding was the board wanted to limit the instances in which this type of accessory structure could be permitted. And that's what the standards were designed to do. You can take out that reference if the board desires to do so.
And I mean, I'm just asking for, and I don't know how the board feels, but if it were a situation where you had the same amount of property and you had a nice structure and a person needed a manager's cottage for a legitimate reason, why would you stop them simply because it's not on the historic register?
Mr. Taylor, if you want to expand that or amend that.
My understanding was
We can do
we
that.
actually said to put that in. It was something we as a board talked about
Right.
and said, if it's a historic, we're looking at for historic properties. We looked at something that was a caretaker's house, and that's why it has to be, have the architecture of the house. I mean, that was all stuff we talked about. So,
I think some of us may have talked, it may have been discussion, but my concern is the fact that I know on the western side of the county, and it used to be the district I used to represent, Mr. Black has that area now, that was a large farm, and the guy had some horses and what have you, and he worked out of town a great deal. He was an attorney and spent a lot of time in Japan and places such as that. He had a property manager's house there on the property. So what you're saying to me is if that situation happens again, he cannot have the property manager's home on that parcel of land.
With this qualification, yes, sir.
I just think you're restricting it so that the average person that may want to do something such as that, have a large farm, and maintain it. I'd much rather see it maintained by someone, and if he's traveling, than not to have it maintained.
But let me ask you the question of, right now in the RP district, though, right now I have one dwelling per 25, or is it 50 acres?
RP is 1 per 10.
1 per 10. Okay.
And what is the Port Royal area considered? Because we did that as 1 for 25.
That's in a resource-sensitive overlay, that's 1 per 25.
So you would have to, in this, you would have to have the 50 acres before you could.
The minimum parcel size, yes, sir. You'd have to at least have a 50-acre parcel to qualify.
Just out of curiosity, what is and I know it's probably hard and maybe you have got the numbers, but if we had left the historic homes in there, how many properties in Caroline would qualify?
That are in excess of 50 acres?
Yeah.
Mr. Shelton's.
Well, no, I'm saying as far as.
He's historic. He's historic.
Yeah, he's historic. If you leave it in there.
Right.
If you leave it in there, how many homes would qualify?
With just the 50 acres?
With the 50 acres that's in there.
Right, and take out the historic.
No, if you leave, I'm just saying, I want a comparison of the two. First of all, what's the number on the historic? If we left the historic in there, how many properties in Caroline would qualify?
You're probably talking potentially 20?
Okay.
I mean, I actually looked it up, and the number escapes me, but approximately 20.
Now, if we take it out,
You're probably in the hundreds.
Again, what?
but, I mean, but right now, I guess the question is, with this, I mean, right now, someone can't, as of right now, someone can't do this, I mean, at all, they can't put a second, correct?
You can have accessory structures on your property as defined by the ordinance. You can have a family apartment. You can have currently a farm tenant structure. You can have a temporary medical hardship structure. So there are provisions in the ordinance that allow accessory dwellings on a parcel of land. This would be a new category in addition to those other categories. But you could not have a structure that's 2,500 square feet in size as an accessory use.
So, like, let's take Mr. Akers' situation, in that, let's say that I have some large farm in Western Carolina, Charlesburg, and we keep the ordinance the way it is for historic homes. Explain to me, in Charlesburg, what I can have. I've got that large farm, it's got 200 acres of land. You've talked about these accessory buildings, so are you saying if we put this ordinance in anyway, I guess I'm just saying we leave it at leave it the way it is with the historic homes, can I then in turn get my building anyway? I mean, it sounds like you're saying, well, I can get a building anyway.
There, currently in the ordinance, you can have a farm tenant structure subject to those standards. So if you qualify, meet the standards for a farm tenant structure, you could have an accessory dwelling under that category. I'm not sure the example that Mr. Akers provided would allow you to qualify for a farm tenant structure. Maybe it would, but again, we'd have to have all the information related to that use of property and whether it was really a farm or not.
What exactly is the definition of the farm tenant structure then?
That's a structure related to agricultural production in which you have certain minimum income streams. I believe it's $10,000. You also have a 50-acre minimum qualification. It's that list of standards that the board has referred back to the Planning Commission to look at.
No,
The other option that you have potentially is you can cut off a 10-acre parcel off of your 200-acre and actually build a site-built house under the RP zoning regulations.
And I can still have the both.
So there is a mechanism there, in theory, that if you wanted to do a structure, you could divide off a parcel and put a structure on there.
That could actually be any size I wanted at that point, right?
Yes,
So
sir.
if I have like one very large building on the 50 acres I own or 70 acres I own, then I'm going to cut off 10. I can have a matching building basically if I wanted to on the 10 acres?
Yes, sir.
There's no need
but
to-
that's much more expensive.
And you have to give it to someone. I mean, you just cannot cut it
Yeah.
off and say, I'm going to put it back in my name and build put a 10-acre, create a 10-acre parcel.
Now, family division, you have to transfer out, but you could cut off a 10-acre parcel. You don't have to transfer it out. But
It's still,
from
you
a
have to,
financing perspective, there may be
yeah,
a totally different
you have to have a
issue.
new deed and all that stuff. But, I mean, I would imagine you can still own it, because, I don't know, I don't have 50 acres, but if you did, I could say, yeah, I'm going to divide this 10 off, and I'm going to make that my Wednesday house, or whatever. That's things that basketball players do.
I guess the concern, if you don't mind, Mr. Chairman, the concern I have, if this were not a historic piece of property, then he wouldn't be able to do this. And I don't know that I would have a problem with him doing that. That's the part that concerns me. I know we want to limit it, but I mean, you know, I don't know that there are that many situations where you're going to have that. But if you do, and they want to spend that kind of money, I mean, this is a very nice manager's, I could deal with it myself.
How many people in this county are going to, they may own 50 acres or 75 acres or 100 acres. How many of us are going to create a manager's home, build another manager's, property manager's home and put it on? It's not going to
You
do
worried
it.
about something that ain't going to happen.
I just think we're going overboard.
Can we, yeah, because the reason we're doing all of this is because we got an application where the house was much larger.
But
Can't we just make this a special exception request?
That's what this would be. It
So-
would be a special exception. These would be your development standards in addition to your general special exception
But see, that's
standards.
a lot more words than if the house is larger than standard, you can apply to the board for special exception. I understand, that's really easy. It's just as restrictive, because it's the same way we were, and then we would just say, if you exceed whatever the square footage is in the area, you can apply for a special exception. Because we're doing a lot of work creating something that's a one-time shot. So if you just say, if you give us text that says, if it exceeds these conditions, you may apply for a special exception. And then the board could say, well, okay, this one case in, East Giblip is fine, we'll approve that, but the one in the heart of Bowling Green, we'll say no to.
So you basically want no standards, just a
No,
regular special?
what we have now is the standards.
Okay.
And give the applicant the opportunity to, if those standards wouldn't satisfy their requirements, to say a special exception request may be submitted to the board for any variation of these standards.
So allow this automatically as an accessory use?
Especially, I am
Special
totally not
exception.
in support of the historical register and those type of things. I just think you're being too restrictive for people in this county that may own some large tracts of land, that
Right.
want to maintain that land.
And it's kind of what Mr. Black was saying in the beginning. What you can do without this text amendment, you can pretty much do almost what you wanted to, except for the fact that,
It cannot be located on the same parcel as...
Right. and
Okay.
and then you give us that special exception ability and say, okay, you got 100 acres, you're going to break off 10. Or you got 100 acres, you're not going to break off 10, you're going to put it over here, whatever. But all that's part of the process. Because we're going to get kind of tight for everything and spend a lot of time on one instance.
Let me come back with another attempt at amendments at your next board meeting.
If you so choose.
Without the historic.
Yeah, if you just.
And I will get rid of the historic reference.
Well, I mean, the whole thing is going to be a thing. Okay, why don't you, why don't you email it to the board so we can see it before and we could talk back and forth about what we like and what we don't like so we can be ready for the next meeting.
Okay, it's fine.
Mr. Chairman,
Thank you,
I
Mr.
think,
Finch.
before he goes, I think we have a little dissension here on whether to keep the historic in. And my argument was, maybe if there was no way to get around it, he clearly said that there's a way basically to get around it with a farm tenant structure. So I don't see why, I mean, to me, it's kind of, I guess in some ways a moot point, but why keeping this in is really a bad thing. Because even if I'm not a historic home and I live in Charlesburg, I can get away with doing a substructure by breaking off 10 acres of land. So we're arguing back and forth about whether we're going to keep this in or not, and I think we need to discuss that because I don't have a problem keeping this in.
Okay, who wants to keep the historic part in?
I think we ought to keep the historic part in.
Okay, Mr. Underwood, you want to keep it in?
I don't know.
Ms. Akers, you want to keep it in?
I'm caught in between. I think we need to take it out because
All right.
the person may not want to do a 10-acre.
All right.
That's getting into.
Bring us
another-
back to, Mr. Fincham, one that says historic, one that doesn't.
Okay?
All right?
Yes, sir.
Because apparently we've got dissension here. So we'll work on that. Okay. But I mean, we're still putting in a lot of effort on something that's a one-shot right now.
Right.
Okay, and it is what we do. All right, that takes care of 3, 4, 5A. Mr. Black, you had YMCA, your question was?
At the last meeting, we had discussed with, and when Mr. Riley was here, you know, I remember specifically asking him about a local Caroline County YMCA board. It was my understanding from when he talked to us, he said, you know, we could work together and work something out. My concern is, I think we all agree that a YMCA, there's no question, the controversy has never been whether a YMCA is a good thing or not. I mean, Mr. Marine's here tonight, we've talked to him before, we know that a YMCA is a good thing, that's not the argument. I would think that we could, seeing that we've had some payment issues in the past, okay? And Mr. Riley said that a local Caroline County YMCA board would have the ability to fundraise. I got to be honest with you, I want, and Mr. Akers and whatever, we may disagree on this, but I don't want anyone, and I'm sure Mr. Akers actually agrees with this, I don't want anyone in the county having to pay for YMCA either. I really think it should be a fundraising. And to me, the reason why we should be doing this, and I would think that all of you would be in agreement, is if I'm going to find someone to pick for a YMCA board from Western Carolina, I want them to be able to have an ability of fundraising or have fundraising experience. Because I don't want to go to the taxpayers in 2015 and say, we owe $8 million and we got nothing. And so that's one of the reasons. Now, I know the YMCA, local YMCA board would do other things. But that's one of the reasons why I think from a perspective of, hey, each one of us, I'm sure, in our district, because right now it seems like we had to be transparent back in August, but now, I don't know, we're picking a YMCA board that, you know, is between Mr. Akers and the YMCA or whatever. I'm saying if we did one per district, it would be much more open, much more transparent, and we could pick someone who is a fundraiser. So that way in 2015, we don't have to say to the taxpayers, we're funding this thing.
Well, hold on one second. The 2015 reality is probably not going to have anything to do with who we put on the board, but your question is really, can there be one member from each district put on the YMCA board? Is that it?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Marine,
Mr.
since you're
Chairman,
here.
if I could, before you go to Mr. Marine.
Well, don't.
No. Just, you've allowed Mr. Black to speak.
I'm going to give you a chance to speak.
But I want to, before Mr. Reed.
Let me just see if he'll say yes to one person from each board, and then I will allow you to respond.
All right.
Mr. Marine, is it possible that I know the Rappahannock Y is appointing the Caroline Y. Is it possible that they would consider allowing each board member to add one person to the Y board? 6 more people.
We consider it, and we currently are trying to find people
From each district.
from all over the county. A very diverse group.
Okay.
From different occupations.
Oh, can you, yeah, I'm sorry, Mr. Marine, could you come to the mic, because, I mean, we can hear you, but the recording won't. And thank you so much for being here. You probably hadn't planned on this, but,
Yes, sir. Thank you for having me.
well, thank you.
We are currently working on creating a board that represents the entire county. One of the items in the agreement between the Y and the county states that each individual has to live in Caroline County that is on the board. The board of directors for the Caroline Family YMCA, just as the board of directors for the Ron Rosner YMCA, the King George YMCA, those specific boards raise money for sustaining that branch.
Operating.
Operating.
Right.
So the Caroline County Board of Directors wouldn't be what the current foundation that was created. Those were two different.
You're talking capital costs versus operations costs. Building
Yes.
it versus
Yes, sir.
keeping it running.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Go ahead.
Are you saying that,
I'm-
because from what I gather when Mr. Riley was here, because I went down a specific list of questions for him, and he said that when I asked him, the Rappahannock YMCA board, the local YMCA boards, it was said that each entity can fundraise, correct?
Correct.
Are you saying that, like, the Fredericksburg area like, let's say Fredericksburg's YMCA or Spotsylvania's YMCA, are you saying the local board has no capital, like if they want to do an extension on Spotsylvania's YMCA, that local board that apparently you guys appointed has no capital raising ability to help fund an extension onto the Spotsylvania YMCA? Is that what I'm
The
hearing?
board assists in capital.
So they can
projects.
fundraise, so they can be a fundraising mechanism for capital, not just operating?
Yes.
Okay, that's all I need to know.
All right. Back to the original question is you would consider having a local member from each magisterial district possibly on the Caroline board?
Yes, we would consider it.
Okay.
I do want to preface that in the sense that there are a couple requirements. There's a set of bylaws to be on the board of directors for the YMCA, whether it's the local branch or the Rappahannock branch. First being, you got to be a member of the Y, obviously.
Duh.
The second being that you advocate and you support the Y, and you how do I say this? You're out promoting the YMCA, its programs, and so forth and so on.
Can you bring us a copy of the bylaw?
I can check on that, yeah. I mean, I assume I can get you a copy of the bylaws. But, you know, like any other nonprofit organization here in Caroline County, obviously you guys don't support, I mean, I don't know how the churches work, I don't know how any other nonprofit works here in the
We have
county.
one member on each church.
You do?
Just kidding.
Okay. Got it.
And Mr. Marine, and I get what you're saying, I really do. But we have between 5 and 8 million reasons why there should be a local member. And I would hope that anyone that I would pick from Western Caroline would be in full support of the YMCA and be someone who is talented in fundraising to try to help raise the money to pay off the YMCA. And I would hope that every single gentleman up here would pick the same type of person.
Well, I would only say that I think they would serve better on the foundation, because the foundation has
capital.
come forward and said, we're going to raise money to pay this off so that people of Caroline County don't have to.
And Mr. Marine, I think you've answered the question that we needed you to answer. Mr. Underwood's follow-up is if you could just send us, or Mr. Cully, a copy of the bylaws that you can send out for membership. We'll distribute that for the whole board. If you could just ask the Rappahannock Y if that's a possibility.
Yes, sir.
We can go from there, and I think we're good.
Okay?
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right? We're
Mr.
good.
Chairman, I guess my only
No, we're
question
not
is,
good.
how many board
You said
members
you
have
were
been
gonna
appointed?
I'm gonna allow you to speak. Go ahead.
So,
Go ahead, Mr. Akers, then I'll go
What
back to you.
what I'm saying, and I appreciate the fact that Mr. Black thinks that the Y, that I control the Y, and that I'm appointing the board members. I can assure you, I have no more influence on the board members they appoint than you do. I don't want to be influenced on how they're appointed, because if something happens, they can't come back and say, yes, remember, you appointed that created the problems for the YMCA. So I am no more involved in that process than you are in appointing the board members. I'm not on the board of directors of the YMCA, and do not want to be on the board of directors of the YMCA. The second thing is, we talk about the $8 million, the $5 million dollars, and I don't, I've heard $10 million, and I don't know where that's come from. I've heard, you mentioned $8 million tonight. I don't know where that's coming from. But the fact is, in King George, and I realize we're not King George, that board didn't appoint members to the YMCA, the local YMCA board, and they gave them 20 acres of land and $4.5 million to build the YMCA.
They gave $4.5 million in cash that we didn't have
To be-
to build the YMCA, so it's a much different situation
not.
than what we're in right, much different.
Gentlemen, the subject is just board participation on the Y, not necessarily how we got there, and I understand that's an emotional topic for all of us. So just that, we're going to have Mr. Marine see if we can get somebody on the board, and we're going to get the bylaws from there, which will satisfy that. Mr. Akers has just explained that he's not appointing people, so I think we can go from there.
I would trust that that's it. Everybody understands that. I am not, and you can ask Mr. Marine, am I appointing, am I approving? Absolutely not.
Mr. Underwood?
Would he like some names of people who may want to consider serving, since he says he's looking for people to serve on the board? Would he like names from? Would you like us to maybe send you some names of people who would consider serving?
Oh, no, that's a good idea, too.
Well, I also would like to say,